Fascinating and honestly kind of terrifying concept based on the end of deception facing the brutal truth of humanity. I want you to just imagine waking up tomorrow morning and suddenly every single human on Earth has completely lost the ability to lie. And I don't just mean the big, scandalous lies. I mean every single little lie. What would happen to our world? And more importantly, what would happen to you?
Okay, let's dive right into this. Just picture a world with absolutely zero fake smiles. No more casually saying I'm fine when you're actually falling apart inside. No more cheating, no pretending, no hiding your true feelings. No more faking your motivation or cooking up clever excuses for why you didn't do something. For the very first time in human history, everyone speaks only the absolute truth. Now, at first glance, that sounds incredibly peaceful, doesn't it? But honestly, if we look closely at how our society actually operates, the reality would be vastly different.
On a macro level, the fallout would literally be immediate and catastrophic. The world as we know it would probably collapse within a week. Marriages would break, friendships would end, and families would just explode as all those unspoken truths finally surface. Schools would descend into absolute chaos as teachers and students voiced their true, unfiltered frustrations with the system. Politicians and celebrities would be in a total panic because they couldn't craft a fake public image anymore. And think about the digital world for a second. Instagram and other social media platforms would essentially disappear overnight. Because really, without lies, social media completely loses its power, doesn't it? There's no fake happiness, no heavily edited lifestyles, no pretending everything is perfect. Global honesty would force a massive, unprecedented reset. Chapter 1. A world without lies. Now, while the collapse of society is a wild thought experiment, the real core of this issue isn't about massive global deception. It's actually about the micro level. Because humans don't just lie to each other, we lie to ourselves the most. Let's look at how our own personal worlds are constructed on a foundation of seemingly harmless, everyday lies.
Now, what's really interesting here is mapping out the massive gap between what we say and what we actually experience. Most people think lying is this hugely evil act, but the scary truth is that human society, and especially student life, is built entirely on these tiny lies. You say, "I'm okay," while the hidden reality is that you're mentally exhausted and completely drained. You tell your parents, or even yourself, "Yeah, I studied," even though you just wasted 6 straight hours scrolling through reels. And then there's the ultimate lie. "I'll start tomorrow." It seems so harmless, right? But the reality is that you're betraying your own potential yet again. These tiny academic and daily lies cause a quiet, invisible, but incredibly heavy pain. It sits on your chest like a rock, not because you're lazy, but because deep down you know the absolute truth.
Chapter 2. The masks we wear. So this brings us to the emotional masks we put on every single day just to survive this disconnect. We project one personality at home to keep our parents happy. We wear a totally different mask at school to fit in with our peers, projecting this fake outward confidence. And we wear yet another mask online? But there is a profound danger here. After years of pretending and constantly switching these masks, you eventually forget which version of yourself is actually real. And this contrast is exactly why certain fictional characters just resonate so deeply with us. On one side, we have our human tendency to wear emotional masks, hiding our academic struggles and insecurities behind fake confidence. But on the other side, we have characters like Monkey D. Luffy from anime. Why does an animated character sometimes feel more real than actual people? It's his raw, unfiltered honesty. Luffy never hides who he is. If he's angry, he shows it. If he cares, he says it. If he dreams, he screams it loudly. That genuine honesty makes people trust him instantly. It's a pretty stark contrast to how we operate in reality, isn't it?
Chapter 3. Dopamine versus true discipline. So why do we hide behind these masks instead of just being honest like Luffy? Well, it all comes down to the immense pressure we face, especially academic pressure, and our own internal fears. When the truth of our struggles becomes way too uncomfortable, we actively seek out ways to just numb that discomfort.
If humans lost the ability to lie, a lot of people would suddenly realize they're genuinely unhappy. Not just a little stressed, but unhappy. And that's because we use specific escape routes to avoid the truth. Mindless scrolling, excessive gaming, overeating, and even sneaky ones like fake productivity, or just passively watching motivational videos without taking any real action. We tell ourselves these are just entertainment, but they aren't. They are direct escape routes from the fear of failure, the fear of loneliness, the fear of becoming ordinary, and most importantly, an escape from the uncomfortable silence of reality. Because silence forces honesty. So the crucial point is this: most people do not actually lack motivation. They lack honesty. If you were brutally honest with yourself, you'd admit exactly what's ruining your life. But truth is uncomfortable. That's why we constantly choose dopamine over discipline. Dopamine gives you comfort right now.
Discipline gives you comfort later. And tragically, most people are perfectly willing to sacrifice their entire future just to escape a little bit of discomfort today.
Chapter 4. The Tiger and Reality. To truly wrap our heads around this internal conflict between fighting reality and actually achieving personal growth, there's this really powerful ancient Buddhist story that perfectly captures our whole situation. It's the story of the tiger.
And this brilliantly illustrates the human condition. The story goes like this. A man is running for his life from a tiger, falls off a cliff, and just manages to grab a branch. He's dangling there. Up above him, the tiger is waiting. Down below him, another tiger is waiting. He's trapped in an impossible, terrifying situation. But then, right beside the branch, he notices a wild strawberry. He reaches out, picks it, smiles, and eats it. Now, why does he do this? Because for one single moment, he completely stops lying to himself. He stops mentally fighting his reality and just accepts it. You see, most of our suffering comes from fighting reality, thinking, I should be further ahead. I should be successful by now. My life should look perfect. But reality doesn't care about your imagined timeline. When you finally stop escaping and accept the present moment, that's when you can find peace and your true potential.
Chapter 5. Ryu and Silent Suffering. Let's bring this powerful concept right down to the micro level and look at a specific scenario. Imagine a student named Ryu. He's a quiet guy. He's always online, always joking around. To everyone around him, Ryu seems perfectly happy. But secretly, behind the mask, he is silently drowning under immense academic pressure and expectations.
Now imagine that no-lying phenomenon suddenly hits. Ryu's sitting with his friends, and one of them asks casually, "Hey, how are you really?" Stripped of his ability to put on that fake smile, Ryu finally drops the mask. For the first time in years, he speaks his raw, unfiltered truth. He just looks up and simply says, "I feel lost." After Ryu says this, there is dead silence. But then, the raw honesty creates this massive domino effect. Another friend looks down and says, "Honestly, me too." Then another agrees, and another. In that single moment, they realize something deeply shocking. Everyone was fighting hidden battles entirely alone. This really highlights the specific toll of silent academic suffering on mental health. It's the absolute tragedy of modern life. Everyone is suffering silently, all while pretending so loudly that everything is perfect.
Chapter 6. Time to stop pretending. So, it's time to turn the mirror directly onto you. It's time to look at your own self-deception. We've talked about the macro world, the masks, the dopamine, and Ryu's silent suffering. But right now, we need to talk about you, and it is time to stop pretending.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the absolute most dangerous lie of them all. I still have plenty of time. You know, lies aren't always malicious. Sometimes we lie because we're just scared of judgment or failure. But this specific lie, it slowly kills your dreams. You tell yourself this, and one day becomes 1 week. 1 week becomes 1 year. And suddenly you wake up older, wondering where the heck your life went. That realization will hurt you far, far more than failing ever could.
The brutal truth here is that you don't need some magical solution, because deep down you already know. You know exactly what bad habits are ruining your focus. You know exactly which daily distractions you use as escape routes. You know the excuses you constantly invent to avoid doing the hard work. And most importantly, you know exactly the kind of person you truly want to become. You have all the data. The person you need to stop lying to isn't your parents or your teachers or your friends, it's yourself. Which leaves us with one final, undeniable question. How much longer will you pretend not to know? Look, the truth is painful temporarily, but lies are painful forever. I really want you to identify the specific lies you tell yourself every single day. If this explainer felt uncomfortably real to you today, then good. Take that immediate step toward living authentically. Drop into the comments and share the biggest lie modern society has completely normalized, and let's face reality together. Thanks so much for joining this explainer. We'll see you next time.
Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into a seriously dramatic thought experiment today. We're going to explore a scenario that honestly sounds like a complete utopia at first, but as you'll see, it very quickly unravels into something way more complicated. We're looking at exactly what would happen if every single human being on Earth suddenly and completely lost the ability to deceive.
Just imagine waking up tomorrow to a profoundly different reality. A world where nobody, and I mean literally nobody, not your parents, not politicians, not your favorite influencers, and definitely not your romantic partners, can utter a single falsehood. Every human being is suddenly forced to tell the absolute, unfiltered truth. At first glance, it sounds beautiful, right? No cheating, zero fake promises, no corruption. But the absence of deception actually brings some incredibly dark consequences.
Because that fantasy immediately collides with brutal reality. Imagine a wife looking at her husband over breakfast and, with zero filter, just stating, "I stopped loving you years ago." Or a best friend casually admitting they've always been secretly jealous of your success. We start with this immediate shock of absolute truth, as spouses and friends utter these shocking confessions that reveal a pretty terrifying underlying fact. Lies were actually the glue holding much of society together.
So let's look at the first 24 hours. The illusion of utopia.
You know, that first day actually feels kind of magical. People would be laughing at how completely fake the world used to be as advertisements and the news finally tell the raw truth. But man, that honeymoon phase ends fast. We go from that hour one relief to a rapidly escalating systemic collapse. By day one, our digital lives are in absolute ruins. By week one, personal relationships break. And by month one, the very institutions governing us are completely gone.
This brings us to the micro-collapse, the death of curated lives.
Social media as we know it would literally die in a week. That constant pressure to post "living my best life" would be physically impossible to fulfill. Instead, your feed would turn into this endless scroll of raw, unfiltered admissions like, "I feel empty, and I compare myself to you." That level of truth would terrify people way more than fake happiness ever did.
And this reveals a concept we can call the Attack on Titan principle. If you know the anime, you know the biggest shocks and most dangerous moments happen when hidden truths about society's walls and history are finally exposed. Just like in that story, we see that truth is incredibly destructive. It completely shatters the established order. Sometimes, humanity only survives and functions precisely because it doesn't know everything.
Which leads right into the macro collapse. Intimacy and institutions crumble.
If you've ever seen the movie Liar Liar, you know that a lawyer losing his filter starts out hilarious, but it quickly ruins his life. Our society basically runs on politeness and emotional protection. Picture a partner asking for reassurance, only to be flatly told, "No, you are not the most attractive person I've loved." Ouch, right? The polite emotional protection we rely on completely disappears, leaving behind just a massive trail of broken hearts. People often say "I'm fine," not because it's true, but because they don't want to burden others. Without that, intimacy becomes an absolute minefield.
And stacking right on top of that personal heartbreak is a total political catastrophe. Governments would collapse overnight. Every single politician stepping up to a podium would be forced to admit, "We care more about power than people, and we manipulate fear to gain votes." Their absolute incompetence and manipulation would be laid bare for the entire world to see. Trust in global leadership would just evaporate in seconds.
This forces us to confront a deeply unsettling historical paradox. We all know that throughout history, lies have caused devastating wars and economic crashes. But it's also an undeniable truth that nations have survived crises specifically because leaders hid terrifying realities from the public to prevent mass panic. So it begs the question, does humanity emotionally need illusions to survive?
As explored in iconic stories like 1984 and Death Note, whoever controls the truth controls the people. But enforcing a system of perfect, unfiltered truth, that doesn't create a utopia. As Light Yagami learns in Death Note, trying to force a perfect world simply makes things darker. Humans just aren't built for the stark, blinding reality of perfectly honest systems. It inevitably breeds dangerous, uncontrollable chaos.
Let's move on to the psychological toll, stripping the emotional masks.
The sheer emotional explosion of just going about your normal day without polite padding would be staggering. Picture walking into work and hearing coworkers plainly state they hate being there, or students telling teachers they are only studying out of a paralyzing fear of failure, or even parents looking at their kids and admitting, "I forced my dreams onto you," without any fake motivation to soften the blow. The emotional weight of carrying everyone's raw truth would be completely suffocating.
See, we survive this weight currently by using emotional masks. Millions of people suffer silently, right? They're constantly told by society to be strong and man up. They wear these masks to survive their day, much like Arthur Fleck does with his forced smiles in the movie Joker. Society actively ignores silent suffering and rewards fake strength. Stripping those masks away forever wouldn't immediately make the world peaceful. Actually, it would make it incredibly ugly and emotionally explosive as we finally see exactly how broken everyone truly is.
Now for the resolution, why truth actually requires empathy.
Because after all that initial explosive fallout, some people would start to feel profoundly free from the pure exhaustion of pretending. Without fake personalities, painful but incredibly genuine human connections would begin to form. Think of how the character Naruto wins over his enemies. He doesn't do it through manipulation, he does it by speaking honestly, directly from the heart. Deep down, we really do crave that authentic truth, even when it cuts deep.
And through this whole brutal process, humanity discovers the most terrifying reality of all. The biggest lies weren't the ones we told our bosses or our partners. They were the ones we used as emotional armor against ourselves. Things like, I'm happy, I'm not afraid, I don't care. Similar to the elaborate, fake identities constructed in The Great Gatsby to escape reality, we build illusions to protect our own egos. Confronting ourselves without that armor, that might just be the scariest part of this entire scenario. So, the absolutely crucial point we arrive at in this explainer is that truth alone cannot save the world. We evolved the ability to lie most likely to protect our emotions and avoid conflict. Therefore, raw truth only works if it's paired with deep empathy. Honesty without kindness is just cruelty. But on the flip side, lies without limits become poison. What humanity desperately needs is balance. Courageous truth spoken with deep compassion.
As we wrap up this exploration today, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. Think about the illusions building your own life right now. If the filter was permanently removed tomorrow, what is the one truth you have been hiding from the world, or even from yourself, that would finally emerge? Something to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.